The handwriting was uneven, like a child had pressed too hard with the pen. The note sat folded on a weathered park bench beneath a dying oak tree, and no one noticed it for 3 days. When someone finally did, they wished they hadn't. It read, "If you're reading this, you're probably the only person who will." The boy who wrote it was 11 years old. His name was Simon Archer, and he had been sitting on that bench every Tuesday and Thursday after school for 6 weeks. He lived 4 blocks away in a narrow apartment above a dry cleaner, where the smell of chemicals seeped through the floorboards, and his mother worked double shifts just to keep the lights on. His father had left when Simon was 7, and the absence hadn't gotten easier, it had just gotten quieter. Simon had started writing the notes because talking felt impossible. At school, he moved through hallways like a ghost. In class, teachers forgot to call on him. At lunch, he sat at the end of a table where the noise of other children felt like a language he didn't speak. He had tried, once, to join a conversation about a video game he actually knew. The other boys had looked at him, then looked away, and continued talking as if he hadn't said a word. So he wrote instead. The first note had been simple. "I wonder if anyone ever sits here and feels the same way I do." He folded it carefully and tucked it between the wooden slats of the bench. Then he walked home, his backpack heavy, his chest heavier. He never expected anyone to respond. But someone did. A woman named Claire Moreau found the second note Simon left. She was 41, recently divorced, and had taken to walking through the park on her lunch breaks. Because her office felt like a cage, and her apartment felt like a museum of a life she no longer recognized. She sat on the bench because it was the only one in the shade, and she liked to watch the joggers pass by, their faces determined and alive in a way she couldn't remember feeling. The note was tucked under a small stone. She unfolded it slowly. "Do you ever feel like you're waiting for something, but you don't know what it is?" Claire stared at the words for a long time. Her hands trembled slightly, and she told herself it was the wind. She looked around the park, but there was no one nearby, just an elderly man feeding pigeons, and a teenager on a skateboard who wasn't very good. She pulled a pen from her purse. On the back of the note, she wrote, "Every single day." She folded it again, placed it back on the bench, and walked away faster than she intended. Simon found her response the next Thursday. He had almost convinced himself that the note would still be there, untouched, a monument to his own invisibility. But when he approached the bench, he saw the paper was in a different position. His heart kicked in his chest. He opened it. When he saw the reply, he sat down hard on the bench, his legs suddenly weak. Someone had read it. Someone had answered. Someone, somewhere, felt the same way he did. He didn't know who. He didn't know why. But for the first time in months, Simon felt something other than the gray weight that pressed on him every morning when he woke up. He wrote back that same afternoon. "I didn't think anyone would answer. I don't know who you are, but thank you. Sometimes I feel like I'm screaming and no one can hear me." Claire found it 2 days later. She had told herself she wouldn't come back to the bench. It was strange, she reasoned, to be exchanging notes with a stranger, possibly a child, based on the handwriting. But she came back anyway, and when she saw the new note, she felt a crack in the shell she had built around herself. She wrote, "I hear you. I don't know who you are either, but I hear you." And then she added, almost without thinking, "You're not alone." For weeks, the notes continued. Simon wrote about small things, how the leaves were changing color, how he liked the sound of rain on windows, how sometimes he stayed up late just to feel like the world was quieter and he could breathe. He never mentioned his name. He never mentioned school, or his mother, or the apartment that smelled like chemicals. Claire wrote about her own small things, how she had started drinking her coffee black because her ex-husband had always made fun of the way she liked it sweet, how she missed her dog who had died 2 years ago, how she kept buying books she never read because it felt like hope. Neither of them knew they were saving each other, but someone else had started noticing the notes. Marcus Delgado was 17 and had been coming to the park to deal weed behind the old restrooms for the better part of a year. He wasn't proud of it, but pride wasn't something his family could afford. His mother was really sickened. The medical bills were piling up faster than his part-time job at the hardware store could cover. He had dropped out of school 3 months ago and told himself it was temporary, even though he knew better. He had seen the kid with the backpack sitting on the bench, writing. He had seen the woman in the business clothes stop him by, lingering, writing something down. At first, he thought it was some kind of dead drop, maybe a way to pass messages for something illegal. He had almost approached them, thinking maybe there was money involved, but then he found one of the notes himself. It was a windy afternoon, and a piece of paper had blown off the bench and tumbled toward the trash can where Marcus was standing. It piqued it up more out of reflex than curiosity. Some days, I think about what it would be like if I just disappeared. Would anyone notice? Would it even matter? Below it, in different handwriting. It would matter. You matter, even if it doesn't feel like it. Marcus stood there, the note in his hand, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. He didn't know why, but he thought about his little sister, Alyssa, who was 9, and still believed he was the smartest person in the world. He thought about how he had snapped at her last week when she asked him to help with her homework, how her face had crumpled, how he had pretended not to notice. He folded the note carefully and put it back on the bench, and then, 2 days later, he left one of his own. I don't know who you are, but I found your notes. I don't have answers, but I wanted you to know someone else is listening. That counts for something, right? Simon found it on a gray Tuesday when the world felt especially heavy. He read it 3 times. There were 2 people now. 2 people who knew. 2 people who cared, he wrote back immediately. It counts for everything. The notes became a rotation, a rhythm, a lifeline. Simon wrote on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Claire wrote on Wednesdays and Fridays. Marcus started writing on Saturdays. None of them knew about the others, but they all felt less alone. And then something shifted. Simon's mother had started asking questions. She noticed he was coming home later, noticed the way he seemed lighter somehow, less withdrawn. One evening, she asked him if he had made a friend at school. Simon hesitated. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to tell her about the bench, about the notes, about the feeling that maybe the world wasn't as indifferent as he had thought. But instead, he just nodded. His mother smiled, and Simon realized he hadn't seen her smile in weeks. Claire had started leaving longer notes. She wrote about her childhood, about the father who had never approved of anything she did, about the way she had spent her whole life trying to be enough for people who would never be satisfied. She wrote things she had never told anyone, not even her ex-husband, and when she returned to the bench and found responses sometimes thoughtful, sometimes just a few words of encouragement, she felt a loosening in her chest, like a fist on. Marcus had stopped dealing. It wasn't a sudden decision. It was gradual, a slow realization that he didn't want to be the person he was becoming. He started picking up extra shifts at the hardware store. He talked to his boss about advancing, about learning a trade. He went home and apologized to Alyssa, and they spent an entire Saturday building a model castle together, the kind she had been asking for. He still left notes on the bench. I think I'm trying to be better. I don't know if it'll work, but I'm trying. And someone always wrote back. But the world, as it often does, had other plans. Simon's mother got laid off. It happened on a Wednesday, without warning, without severance. She came home in the middle of the day and sat at the kitchen table with her head in her hands, and Simon stood in the doorway, watching, feeling the weight settle back onto his shoulders. They would have to move. She told him that night, her voice flat and tired. They couldn't afford the apartment anymore. They would stay with her sister in another town, 2 hours away, just until she found work again. Simon's first thought was the bench. He wouldn't be able to leave notes anymore. He wouldn't be able to check for responses. The people who had been listening, they would think he had disappeared. They would think he had given up. He felt something close to panic. That Thursday, he went to the bench one last time. He wrote the longest note he had ever written. I have to leave. I don't want to, but I don't have a choice. I don't know who you are, any of you, but you saved me. I don't know if you'll ever know that, but you did. I was drowning, and you threw me a rope. Thank you. Please, don't stop writing. Please, don't stop hoping. Maybe someone else needs you the way I needed you. He left the note on the bench, weighted down with a smooth stone he had been carrying in his pocket for weeks. Then he walked away, his vision blurred, his throat tight. Claire found the note on Friday. She read it twice, then a third time. And then she sat down on the bench and cried in a way she hadn't cried since the divorce. She didn't know who the boy was. She didn't know where he was going or why, but she felt the loss of him like a physical thing, an absence that ached. She wrote back anyway. Wherever you are, I hope you're okay. I hope you know that you mattered to me. You still do. Thank you for reminding me that connection is possible, even between strangers. I won't stop writing. I promise. Marcus found both notes on Saturday. He stood in front of the bench for a long time, reading them over and over. He thought about the kid he had seen, small and quiet, always alone. He thought about how easy it would have been to ignore him, to dismiss him as just another lonely kid in a city full of lonely people. But he hadn't. And now that kid was gone. Marcus pulled out his own pen. I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I hope you're somewhere better. You made me want to be better. I didn't think that was possible, but you did it. I'm going to keep writing too. Maybe someone else will need it. And so they kept writing. For months, Claire and Marcus left notes on the bench, not knowing about each other, but both honoring the promise they had made to a boy whose name they didn't know. Other people started finding the notes. A college student struggling with anxiety wrote about how hard it was to get out of bed some mornings. An elderly woman wrote about losing her husband and not knowing how to fill the silence. A middle-aged man wrote about his estranged daughter and the apology he didn't know how to give. And every time someone wrote back, the bench became a place of quiet communion, a repository for pain and hope and the fragile belief that someone, somewhere, was listening. Claire started coming to the bench more often. She began to recognize the different handwriting, the different voices. She felt like she was part of something larger than herself, a web of invisible threads connecting people who would never meet, but who held each other up nonetheless. Marcus brought Alyssa to the park one Saturday. She was fascinated by the notes, by the idea that strangers could be kind to each other without expecting anything in return. She asked if she could leave a note too. Marcus helped her write it. You are loved, even by people who don't know you. Alyssa, age 9, and then, almost a year after Simon had left his first note, something extraordinary happened. Claire arrived at the bench on a cold October morning and found a new note. But this one was different. The handwriting was the same uneven, childlike script from the very beginning. Her hands shook as she unfolded it. I don't know if anyone remembers me, but I used to write here. I had to leave, and I thought I'd never come back. But my mom found a job, and we moved back last week. I came to the bench today because I wanted to see if anyone was still writing. I can't believe you are. I can't believe you kept your promise. I'm crying right now. Thank you. Thank you for not forgetting. Claire pressed the note to her chest and looked around the park, searching for the boys she had never met but had carried in her heart for months. And then she saw him. He was sitting on the grass about 20 feet away, watching her, his eyes wide and uncertain. She walked toward him slowly, and when she got close, she knelt down. Was it you? She asked softly. Were you the one who started this? Simon nodded, unable to speak. Claire's eyes filled with tears. You saved me, she whispered. You have no idea, but you saved me. Simon's face crumpled, and he started to cry, and Claire pulled him into a hug. This boy she didn't know, this boy who had reminded her what it felt like to be human. Marcus showed up an hour later with Alyssa. He saw the woman and the boy sitting on the bench together, talking quietly, and he understood immediately. Ewol ober Alyssa's hendiness. And when Simon looked up, Marcus, you're the one who started the notes, aren't you? Simon nodded again. Marcus sat down beside him. You changed my life, kid. I don't say that lightly. Alyssa Everbold leaned forward. Are you the one who made my brother nice again? Simon laughed through his tears. I don't think I did that. You did, Marcus said quietly. You really did. They sat there together, the four of them, as the afternoon light slanted through the trees. They talked about the notes, about the people who had written, about the lives that had been touched by a simple act of reaching out. Claire suggested they keep the bench going, not just for themselves, but for everyone who might need it. Marcus agreed. Alyssa insisted on making a small sign to put near the bench. Something subtle, just to let people know it was a safe place to share. Simon felt something he had never felt before, a sense of belonging, of purpose, of mattering. Over the following months, The bench became something of a local legend. People started calling it the Hope Bench. Articles were written about it in small community newsletters. A local news station did a brief segment, though they never identified Simon or Claire or Marcus by name. They wanted to keep it pure, untainted by the performative nature of viral fame. But the most important thing was that the notes kept coming. A teenager wrote about coming out to his parents and being rejected, and a week later found a note from someone who had gone through the same thing and survived. A woman wrote about her miscarriage, about the grief that no one seemed to understand, and found notes from other women who had been there, who knew the specific weight of that loss. A man wrote about his addiction, about how many times he had tried and failed to get clean, and found notes that didn't judge, that just said, "Keep trying. You're worth it." Simon continued to visit the bench every week. He was 12 now, 10-tier teen, and the loneliness that had once defined him had shifted into something else, not gone entirely, but manageable, bearable, shared. He made friends at school. It was slow, awkward, but it happened, and when the loneliness crept back in, as it sometimes did, he went to the bench and read the notes, and remembered that he wasn't alone. Claire had started volunteering at a crisis hotline. The notes had taught her how to listen, how to hold space for someone else's pain without trying to fix it. She was good at it. It gave her life a shape it had been missing. Marcus finished his apprenticeship and became a licensed electrician. He bought his mother a small house with a yard, and Elisa planted a garden. On weekends, he still went to the park with her, and they read the notes together, sometimes adding their own. Years passed. The bench weathered storms and seasons. The wood was replaced once, then twice, but the spirit of the place remained. People came and went. Some left a single note and never returned. Others came back for years, finding solace in the anonymous exchange, in the knowledge that someone out there understood. And then, on a quiet spring morning when Simon was 17 and preparing to leave for college, he went to the bench one last time. He had been accepted to a university 3 states away. He was excited, terrified, hopeful. His mother had cried when she helped him pack, not from sadness, but from pride. He carried a note he had written the night before. "I'm leaving again, but this time it's different. This time I'm not running away from anything, I'm running towards something. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I'm not afraid anymore. To everyone who ever wrote here, you taught me that hope is a practice, not a feeling. You taught me that connection is possible, even in the loneliest moments. I will carry this bench with me wherever I go. Thank you for saving my life." He placed the note on the bench, beside a small pile of others, and stood there for a long time. Then he heard footsteps. He turned and saw a young girl, maybe 10 or 11, approaching the bench slowly. She had a piece of paper in her hand, folded carefully. She looked at Simon, hesitant. Is this the bench where you can leave notes?" she asked quietly. Simon smiled. "Yeah, it is. And people actually read them." "They do," Simon said. "I promise you, they do." The girl bit her lip, then placed her note on the bench, her hand lingering on the paper for a moment, before she pulled away. Simon waited until she had walked a few steps, then called out, "Hey." She turned. "You're not alone," he said. The girl's eyes welled up, and she nodded quickly before walking away. Simon stood there, watching her go, and felt the full weight of what the bench had become. It wasn't just a place. It was a testament to the fact that even the smallest acts of courage a note left on a bench, a moment of vulnerability, a willingness to be seen could ripple outward in ways no one could predict. He thought about the boy he had been, the one who had felt invisible, who had believed his words didn't matter. He thought about Claire, about Marcus, about Elisa, about all the people whose lives had intersected at this one small point in the world. And he thought about the girl who had just walked away, carrying a hope she didn't yet know would be answered. Simon took a deep breath and walked toward his future, knowing he would carry the bench with him wherever he went, knowing that some connections, once made, could never truly be broken. Behind him, the note he had left fluttered slightly in the breeze, and somewhere in the city, someone was already heading toward the bench, carrying their own quiet pain, their own desperate hope. The cycle would continue, because loneliness, Simon had learned, was never truly defeated it, was only met with the persistent, stubborn belief that someone, somewhere, was listening. And that belief, however fragile, was enough to change the world.